Chapter 262. The wolves are here. On the other hand, Zhouing used a large plastic bucket to fill up with water from her inner space 3 times, watering her sweet potato field. After that, she took out 20 purple perilla plants from a corner and planted them in the field. She locked up and brought Erzhuang up the mountain. After arriving at the mountain, Zhouing was specifically looking for wild vegetables, especially dandelion and woad. If something really happened, these 2 things could save lives. A woman and her dog shuttled through the mountain. Suddenly, Erzhuang started barking. Zhouing immediately turned her head and saw him chasing a rabbit. Zhouing shook her head and continued picking up the woad roots. However, Erzhuang still didn't come back. She had no choice but to get up and search for herbs as she chased after her dog. She didn't have to go far before she heard Erzhuang's low growl. Just as she was about to call out, she saw something moving in the grass. She thought it was a rabbit and just shut her mouth. However, Zhouing was shocked when she saw 2 wolves leaping out of the grass and pouncing on Erzhuang. Fortunately, the dog was quick-witted and didn't fight the wolves head-on. Instead, he turned around and ran in the opposite direction of her. Zhou Ying's heart pounded. She immediately took out a crossbow from her interspace, loaded an arrow with knockout powder, and shot it at a wolf from behind. Oh, whoa! A blood-curdling howl was heard as the wolf was shot in the hind leg and fell to the ground. Erzhuang and the remaining wolf heard the cry and immediately turned their heads. The 2 animals immediately reacted when they saw the wolf on the ground with Zhouing over it. The wolf raised its head and howled to call its companions, while Erzhuang pounced on it. At the same time, Zhouing also took the opportunity to shoot another arrow. The wolf wanted to dodge when it heard the arrow's whistling sound, but Erzhuang didn't give it a chance. He blocked the wolf's path of retreat. Thus, although the wolf managed to avoid the fatal blow to its throat, it still brushed past one of its legs, and blood immediately flowed. As soon as the smell of blood came out, the wolf's ferocity was stimulated, and it turned around and pounced on Zhouing. Erzhuang stopped it from doing so. He didn't directly confront the wolf, but instead began encircling it. After a few moments, the wolf fell to the ground with a thud under the effect of the knockout powder. Erzhuang paused for a moment, then lowered his head and bit it a few times. After making sure the wolf wasn't moving anymore, he wagged his tail and ran to Zhou Ying's side. He ran around her in circles and asked for praise. Well done. We'll give you an extra meal tonight, but we must leave quickly, or else we'll be surrounded by more wolves. That'll really put our lives in danger. After Zhouing finished speaking, she quickly killed the 2 wolves with her boning knife and threw them into her interspace. She then scattered a large bag of tear-inducing powder nearby to interfere with the wolves' sense of smell. Once all that was done, she quickly ran down the mountain with her dog. Not long after, the howls of wolves could be heard from behind. The number of wolves in this pack was quite large. Erzhuang, who had been strolling, was frightened by the howls. He didn't dare to play anymore and quickened his pace down the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, Zhouing saw the patriarch with a group of strong men guarding the foot of the mountain. The patriarch saw her coming down the mountain and asked, "Zhouing, are you all right?" "I'm fine. I ran down the mountain as soon as I heard wolves howling." Zhouing shook her head. "That's good. I haven't heard a wolf howl in the outer area of this mountain for many years." What an unexpected! At that point, the patriarch looked at her. "Don't go up the mountain anytime soon. Wolves move in packs, and it will be dangerous if you encounter them." "I know, but we can't keep guarding against them. Why don't we dig some sorry for the inconvenience?" "Thank you very much." Chapter 263. Setting up traps. We do need to dig more. The patriarch nodded in agreement. After a few polite exchanges, Zhouing went home. After entering the inner space that night, Gu Chungrui was shocked to see 2 wolves. He quickly turned his head and asked, "Did you encounter wolves on the mountain today?" "Yup. Fortunately, they were just 2 wolves that were alone. After killing them, we left the mountain." Zhouing looked at him with a dry smile. Gu Shengru's heart softened when he saw her fawning eyes, but he still said with lingering fear, "From today on, you're not allowed to go up the mountain anymore. If you're free, go to the mountains in your inner space and collect the herbs you need." "I know. I definitely won't go there anytime soon." Zhouing nodded. You're not allowed to brush me off, or I'll eat durians in front of you daily. Zhou Ying's face scrunched when she heard that. The things she hated the most in her life were durians and stinky tofu. She couldn't even smell them. If Gu Chungrui didn't like these things, she wouldn't keep them in her inner space. Of course, she wasn't afraid if they were only in the warehouse. After all, he was the only one who could take the items out of the warehouse. The worst thing was that he had even planted a few durian trees in her inner space, and she didn't expect him to turn around and disgust her with this. Thinking of this, she gritted her teeth in anger. Gu Chungrui looked at her provocatively and said, I mean what I say. If you don't believe me, you can try. After speaking, he turned around and took out a knife to skin the two wolves. He hung the skins on the second floor of the villa. As for the meat, he cut it into pieces, stacked it up, and put it in a big bucket to cook. Seeing this, Zhou Ying turned around and went to the mountain. The fruits on the mountain had ripened, and she had to quickly pick them up to store them in the warehouse, or else they would be wasted. The next day, the patrol team, which usually patrolled at night, began to patrol during the day. Zhou Ying didn't dare go up the mountain again, so she only went to the manor with Erzhuang. Chang Shun, busy pruning the white sweet potato vines in the field, saw her coming and immediately greeted her. Mistress, what are you doing here? Nothing much. I had nothing to do at home, so I came over to take a look. Zhou Ying asked, How are Qin Zhuang and the children? How are they? Did they cause you any trouble? No, they're all fine, and they're all very diligent. They're now living in the courtyard and taking care of themselves, or rather, they don't need to be taken care of at all. At this point, Chang Shun paused and said, It's just that they ate a little too much. I'm afraid the grain in the village can't support their consumption. Oh, you are lacking in food? We'll discuss it with Uncle Nian later. We can kill a cow or sheep every 3 to 5 days. I'll thank you on behalf of everyone. My stomach can't take it anymore after not seeing meat for half a month. Chang Shun immediately laughed when he heard that. All right, we'll go over and take a look. After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she exchanged a few polite words with Manager Liu, then turned around and walked toward the farm. She first walked around the place and saw that the cattle and sheep were doing well. Only then did she let out a sigh of relief. Finally, after asking around, she found Uncle Nian at the foot of a mountain, setting up traps with his men. Zhou Ying was stunned when she saw that the nearly 2-meter-wide trench was full of sharpened bamboo skewers. Uncle, are you guarding against wolves? That's right. Who would have thought that wolves would appear again? We have to set up these traps, or it will be too late when the wolves really come. At this point, the old man paused and recalled. I remember when I was young, there was a year when 30 wolves came to the village. In just a short while, they bit 300 sheep to death. I see. You really have to guard against it well, then. They'll bring some pepper and mustard over later. Wolves and their sharp noses are most afraid of these things. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Chapter 264, Gifting Tear-Inducing Powder, Then I'll Be Waiting. Uncle Nian immediately smiled and nodded. Wolves weren't only strong in combat, but they also held grudges. Therefore, they didn't want to kill them unless it was absolutely necessary. Otherwise, they would have to exterminate the entire wolf pack. However, a wolf pack wasn't easy to exterminate. Many villagers would die from exterminating every last wolf. So, if there were a way to deal with the wolves, it would naturally be the best. Zhou Ying nodded and continued, Uncle Nian, to save on consuming grain. I plan to slaughter a cow or sheep every few days so that the people in the village can eat meat. What do you think? You're kind for doing so, but try to slaughter as little as possible. After this draft, the price of meat will definitely rise a lot. Furthermore, the manor was very safe with Manager Liu and the others around, so there isn't any need to be afraid of robberies. Therefore, if you really want to improve the meals of everyone, you can take in pigs. Pigs have a lot of meat and are more filling. Pigs. Zhou Ying paused for a moment to think before nodding. Indeed. Then it's decided. Let's serve them pork first. We'll talk about cattle and sheep if there's nothing else. All right, you can send the pigs you buy over directly. I promise I won't waste a single drop of pig blood. Afterwards, Zhou Ying gave him a few more instructions, telling him he could directly look for Manager Liu if he needed anything, and she returned to her village. She went to her inner space in the afternoon and took out some devil chilies and mustard powder. She used them to make 2 big bags of tear-inducing powder. Xiaonyang walked over with her pregnant belly when she was just done and asked, "Mistress, are you making tear-inducing powder again? I can feel my nose getting choked from next door." "Yeah, there are wolves on the mountain. I have to prepare some for self-defense." After Zhouing finished speaking, she brought a stool for her to sit on. "You weren't busy drying the beans today?" "Thank you, mistress. We were almost done yesterday," said Xiaonyang after she sat down. "My eldest sister-in-law is taking care of the rest with the 2 children. It seems that you're living a stable life. It's all thanks to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this blessing." Xiaonyang smiled shyly. Honestly, although they weren't wealthy, it was a comfortable life. Her husband was down to earth, willing to work, and knew how to love her. Her eldest sister-in-law wasn't like the other families, who would find trouble for no reason. Instead, she had helped them a lot, which was a lifesaver. "That's great. Brother Tian is a man worth entrusting your life to." Zhouing said so and gave her about half a pound of tear-inducing powder. "It isn't peaceful now, so keep some for self-defense." "Thank you so much, my mistress." Xiaonyang thanked her as she took it. "Sigh, since you've already broken away from your status as a servant, don't always mention that I used to be your mistress. Even if I've moved on from my servant status, I'll always be your servant. This is not going to change." "You?" Zhouing smiled and shook her head. She put away the tear-inducing powder and brought her into the house. They sat down, drank tea, and chatted for a while. Only when Xiaonyang felt tired did she go home. As for Zhouing, she took a portion of tear-inducing powder and gave some to the patriarch so that he could distribute it to the patrol team for self-protection. At night, the couple chose 2 fat pigs from her inner space. The following day, the tear-inducing powder and the pigs were sent to the manor. Once that was done, Gu Chungrui drove the carriage to town while Zhouing stayed in the manor to have a meal. In the afternoon, she brought home 5 pounds of pork ribs and 2 pounds of pork belly. Someone came to visit for medication help in the afternoon. It happened that the patient required surgery, something Gu Chungrui was good at. After confirming it was a patient from the wealthy Wang family in town, he took the first aid kit and followed them. "Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much." Chapter 256 Ambush. However, Gu Chungrui's footsteps gradually slowed when he reached the Wang family's house. This was not the first time he visited the Wang family. Every time he came here, there would be guards on duty, and the nearby streets were clean without dust. But now, not only were leaves and branches flying everywhere on the street, but even dog and cat poop were all over the ground. There wasn't even a shadow of a person in sight at the main gate of the residence, where people usually entered and exited. He immediately became vigilant. Did something happen to the Wang family? Or was it? Thinking of this, he looked at the person who had led him here and quickly realized that he had been careless. Because this person was really too thin, so thin that he was a little out of shape. Although the harvest this year wasn't good, with the Wang family's heritage, they wouldn't starve their servants to this extent. "Why did you stop? Hurry up. Our old master is still waiting for you to treat him." The guide saw him stop and immediately turned his head to urge him. "Doesn't your family's 3rd concubine have medical skills? She'll do fine for emergency treatment. My stomach suddenly hurts. I have to go to the toilet to resolve it." Gu Chungrui turned around and ran to a public toilet not far away. "Wait, don't we have a side toilet in the manor? Let's go over there." The guide immediately rushed over and blocked his way. "No, your master is a clean freak. If I use your manor's side toilet, they'll have to wait for your master's approval. It'll be too late by then." Gu Chungrui pushed him away and probed carefully. The guide was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that there would be such a problematic person. He quickly stopped him and said, "They'll be fine if I run faster ahead to ask for permission. Just follow me." Gu Chungrui knew he was lying when he heard the person's reply. This was because Gu Chungrui was simply making things up when he said he needed the old master's approval to use the toilet. Looking at his anxious mood, he confirmed that the Wang residence was an ambush. So, when Gu Chungrui saw him coming over again, he twisted his arm and pulled him down to the ground. Gu Chungrui knelt, lifted the guide's arms, and pressed his face down on the ground. He stopped and asked, "Who are you? And who are the people inside?" Cough, cough, The guide returned to his senses and struggled a few times, but it was no use. The more he struggled, the more pain he felt. He could only shout, "My lord, big brother, help, help." Although he was shouting with all his might, his voice was muffled. He was subdued with his head lowered, which meant his shouts couldn't reach the ideal volume to be heard from the residents. Only one person could listen to them, and it was Gu Chungrui. Seeing this, Gu Chungrui forcefully twisted the person's wrist. Following a muffled groan, he leaned over and asked, "Who's inside? Tell me the truth, or I'll take your life first." Then, he removed a scalpel from his first aid kit and waved it in front of the person's eyes. The scalpel of fine steel reflected a sharp light under the sunlight, and the glint blinded the guide. Of course, Gu Chungrui had no intention of just showing off. He stuck it directly to his face and made a light cut. Thus, a wound that could only bleed was born. The guide felt a chill on his face, and then he felt something flowing down. When he saw that it was blood, he was so scared that he started to shiver. Gu Chungrui sneered. "What do you think? My scalpel here is sharp, huh? It can cut your windpipe without any effort." After he finished speaking, he placed the scalpel on his neck. "Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much." Chapter 266. Jumping out, the guy didn't dare move anymore and stammered, "There's an ambush inside. It's the people who worked at the mill." Gu Chungrui was stunned for a moment. "So you're the group of people who went to the restaurant to rob us and were later arrested?" On the other hand, the people lying in ambush inside the courtyard had heard the guide's voice, but they didn't see him come in for a long time, so they sent someone out to take a look. The person who came out heard Gu Chungrui's question and shouted, "Yeah, it's us. We'll take revenge on you today." After he shouted, he rushed up. Gu Chungrui immediately kicked the person under his feet, slamming him into the other person running here. The two of them fell and rolled like a ball. At the same time, the people inside heard the shouts and immediately rushed out. There were 25 people, and they quickly surrounded Gu Chungrui. Gu Chungrui looked at the sticks in their hands and knew he couldn't face them head-on. As he turned and ran, he took out a handful of knockout powder from his first aid kit and scattered it behind him. Everyone saw the white powder and immediately retreated to the side. However, some still breathed in some of it, and those who inhaled it fell after taking 2 steps. Nearly half of the people went down, and those who dodged immediately scattered and tried to surround him. Gu Chungrui immediately pretended to panic and shouted, "Robbery! Someone's robbing me!" At the same time, he observed the positions of the crowd and finally fixed his eyes on the first person on his right. He ran the fastest, and the weapon in his hand was a special walking stick, sturdy and suitable to lash out as a makeshift staff. So, when Gu Chungrui was escaping, he suddenly turned and rushed over to the person. Before the person could react, Gu Chungrui threw the scalpel at his face. The man was shocked and dodged subconsciously. In a flash, Gu Chungrui grabbed the walking stick from his hand. At the same time, he rolled over to pick up the scalpel and threw the first aid kit under a wall. When the people behind him rushed over, he swept in a wide arc with his staff. The hit people were in so much pain that they could only lie on the ground, hugging their legs and groaning. Gu Chungrui stood back up. He fought against the rest of them with his makeshift staff in his right hand and a scalpel in his left. From time to time, he would sneak in and attack. He had taken down 5 of them quickly, and each had cuts on their weapon-dominant hands. Although it wasn't enough to kill them, they would definitely bleed to death if they weren't dealt with quickly. "You're really ruthless, kid," an elderly man with a pained expression said at this time. "Not as ruthless, thick-skinned, or hostile as you. After being punished for robbing, you didn't stop and even plan to take revenge. Aren't you afraid of losing these people's lives? What a selfish man you are." Gu Chungrui commented sarcastically. "Fuck off. Whoever lives or dies today will depend on their own abilities. Everyone, let's attack together." The old man's face twitched, and he gritted his teeth. It's not too late to back out now. Otherwise, It'll be over when the patrol team comes. Gu Chungrui rushed up to the old man after he said his piece. If he didn't guess wrong, this person was their leader. When he realized this, he decided to get rid of him first. He had to deal with the problem at its root, and the rest will fall apart. Gu Chungrui only managed to hit his arm once, but he managed to throw his opponent into a state of confusion. He then sent a flying kick at his opponent's chest. Puffed! The old man violently spat out a mouthful of blood and was kicked nearly 10 feet away, falling to the ground and not getting up again. Chapter 267, Injured. It took a long time to describe the fight, but it all happened in the blink of an eye. The few people surrounding them were dumbfounded and didn't dare to step forward. At that time, the patrolling guards followed the shouting and came over. When they saw the group of people, they shouted, "Why are you all here again? The constable has just let you go, and now you're making trouble again?" The captain then walked toward Gu Chungrui and asked, "Dr. Gu, are you all right?" "I'm fine, but these people must be dealt with seriously. They're more abominable than bandits." Gu Chungrui glanced at the crowd and commented. The refugees immediately put down the sticks in their hands and said, "We're innocent. We didn't plan on doing it, but the village chief forced us to do so." Yes. Last time, his 2 sons went to rob a restaurant and were both caught. When they came out, one died and one was seriously injured. That's why he's blackmailing us to help him take revenge. Yes, our food and provisions are all controlled by his trusted aides. If we don't listen to him, we will starve. The old man, who had been struggling to get up, vomited 3 mouthfuls of blood after hearing this and fainted. When the captain heard this, his face immediately darkened. He waved his hand at the guards to capture them. "Dr. Gu, we'll have to trouble you to come with us." "That's fine." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he picked up the first aid kit and followed. After arriving at the Yampt, Tian Jingzhong seriously interrogated the refugees. After learning that the village chief had indeed coerced them, he arrested more than a dozen heavily involved criminals and their families for execution. This included the 5 injured people, which saved some medical expenses. Although the others were released, they were expelled from Qingshui town, and their faces were plastered throughout the county. Hence, they were chased out of Yunnan County within 2 days. The group could only take a small amount of food to the south. Of course, this was a story for later. After Gu Chungrui left the police station, he returned to the clinic and got Dr. Luo to get treated. Although he wasn't wounded, he was hit twice with a stick, once on his back and once on his leg. Although it wasn't fatal, the bruises were still scary looking. He didn't dare let Zhouing know about those. After that, Dr. Luo clapped his hands and said, "All right, you're a medical professional yourself, so I don't need to remind you of what you need to do. Take a good rest for the next 2 days. Forget it. It'll be exposed if I stay at home." Gu Chungrui said this as he dressed. "You have to be more careful in the future. If you can't win the fight, run. Don't force yourself." If something were to happen to you, what would Zhouing do? Yes, but sometimes it's impossible to run. The best choice is to face it. Dr. Luo shook his head and ignored him. Instead, he packed up and left. Seeing this, Gu Chungrui sat down and drank 2 glasses of water. After resting for a while, he called Gu Chexi and rushed home in his carriage. In the evening, Zhouing had nothing to do. She steamed 2 giant crabs, made a pot of spicy shrimp, and stewed half a pot of corn and pork rib soup. Gu Chungrui looked at the sumptuous dinner on the table, and the corner of his mouth twitched. If it were in the past, he would have eaten them happily. He could only cat ribs now due to his injuries. "What's wrong with you?" Zhouing asked curiously. "Don't you like spicy food? Why don't you eat the prawns?" "You can have them. I have a toothache because of the heat. I'll eat it another day when I have the chance." Gu Chungrui replied while gnawing on a rib. Zhouing didn't think much about it. After the meal, she made him a pot of herbal tea and said, "The weather is really getting dry. You have to drink more water in town." Chapter 268, A Small Joke, You Too. It's just too hot these days. Remember to drink 2 bottles of energy drink every day to prevent dehydration. "I will," Zhouing replied. She got up, lit a plate of mosquito incense, and put it in the room. Coincidentally, someone came to visit Gy Chungrui for medical consultation. He got up and went to attend to the patient. When he was sending the patient off, Zhouing found that his leg was walking funny and his shoulder was stiff. When he returned, she asked directly, "You're not feeling heaty but injured, right?" Gu Chungrui was stunned for a moment and shook his head. "Why would I be injured? I'm a doctor, not a guard. Let's quickly pack up and enter the inner space." Zhouing snorted coldly after hearing that. She got out of bed and walked in front of him, raised her hand, and was about to take off his clothes. Gu Chungrui quickly grabbed her hand and said, "Don't. I'm injured, but there's no wound. A stick just hit me." "Really?" Zhouing raised her head with a look of disbelief. "It's true. Since I've answered, there's no need to hide it from you." After Gu Chungrui said this, he finally told her how he had almost fallen into an ambush today. No matter what, they've already left. We can finally breathe a sigh of relief. After Zhouing heard this, she bit the back of his hand and said, "If you dare to lie again, they'll punish you by making you eat mangoes for a month. You little rascal, you knew I was allergic to mangoes, but you still want me to eat them. Are you trying to murder your husband?" Gu Chungrui retorted with a smile. The words, "murder your husband," made Zhouing suddenly remember their identity as husband and wife. She thought of their married life, and her face suddenly blushed as she rolled her eyes at him. At the same time, under the light of the oil lamp, Gu Chungrui looked at her hazy outline and shy but lively eyes. He felt his throat tighten. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her lips eagerly. The familiar yet strange feelings that had been suppressed for a long time were stirred up and burned passionately like dry wood and fire. Just as the couple wanted to take a step further, Gu Chungrui took a deep breath. The two instantly sobered up. They looked at each other and smiled, but soon they kissed again. But this time, it was a sweet kiss. It was a kiss of enjoyment, but also a kiss of nostalgia. After this kiss, they kissed again. After repeating this several times, Zhouing finally stopped when she felt her lips swell. She held his shoulder and said, "Let me see your injuries. I'm really fine. It's just a bruise. They'll be fine after a few days of rest." Gu Chungrui shook his head. "Nope." Zhouing shook her head. She knew he was a person with strong self-control. Otherwise, they wouldn't have lived together for nearly 2 years and still haven't done anything. So, if it were only a bruise, it wouldn't hurt so much that he grimaced in pain. Gu Chungrui looked at her firm expression and smiled. He gave her a peck on the lips and said, "Is it because you've been in abstinence for 2 years, and now you want to eat me up?" Zhouing paused for a moment. After she understood what he meant, she pinched his waist and said, "You don't want your bird anymore, do you?" "Wait, I'm just joking. They'll let you see it, okay? But let's go to the inner space. Anyway, now is a good time to take a shower. It's so hot around here." Gu Chungrui grabbed her hand and replied, "We'll have to see if your body can enter the shower." After Zhouing finished speaking, she turned around and locked up, then took him into her inner space. When they reached the bedroom in the villa, Gu Chungrui found some safflower ointment and took off his shirt. "Can you help me take a look?" Zhouing saw the swollen black and purple wound and asked, "Was it Dr. Luo who treated it?" "Yes. It was so painful that I almost cried out. I think you should get an X-ray. This injury looks a little serious." Zhouing decided to take him into a small operating room. She turned on the instrument and took an X-ray of him. Chapter 269 Sick Leave. Gu Chungrui took the X-ray film and glanced at it. "Oh, I really hurt my bones. Fortunately, it's only a slight fracture. They'll be fine after a good rest. I think you should rest at home for a few days. You can go to the clinic when you're almost fully recovered." Zhouing advised after letting out a sigh of relief. "That's true. The clinic isn't busy now, so we'll rest at home for a few days." "All right, they'll just give you a simple massage. After I'm done, you can lie down and rest." After Zhouing finished speaking, she went to the bathroom with him. She filled half a basin with warm water and helped him wipe his back. After she helped him wipe his body, she cleaned his wound with iodophor, applied some safflower oil, and finally wrapped it twice with gauze to prevent the medicinal oil from getting on the bed. After she was done, she helped him put on a vest and said, "All right, you can rest. I'll be busy for a while." Gu Qingrui did not insist this time because he realized that the injury on his back was getting more and more painful. Even standing was getting a little tricky. He had no choice but to drink a spoonful of sleeping-inducing powder to help him sleep. After Zhouing finished her work, she fed the animals in her grassland and then went to the mountains to work. She also prepared 100 pounds of black flour, 500 shiitake mushroom stuffed buns with black fungus and chicken, 500 mutton and radish stuffed buns, and approximately 300 beef stuffed buns. After she was done, she used her mental power to take a black fish out of the river. She boiled a pot of fish soup in a clay pot and stored it in the warehouse. After that, she left her inner space and went to sleep. The two had black fish soup and chicken stuffed buns for breakfast the following day. After eating, Zhouing drove the carriage to the clinic with Gu Qingxi and informed them that Gu Qingrui was taking sick leave. After coming out, she went to her restaurant to ensure that her workers were fine, then drove the carriage back. She didn't expect to see Gu Qingxi swaying his feet as he sat in the carriage when she walked out of the back door. She was stunned for a moment and went forward to ask, "Why are you here? Isn't the clinic busy?" "I'm on leave. Since Qingrui is injured, I want to go back and learn from him. I can also help you out." Gu Qingxi raised his head and replied. Zhouing paused for a moment. "That's fine too. It's not safe on the road now. You're just a child, so it wouldn't be safe for you to go back and forth. I'm already 12, not a child anymore. A half-grown child, okay?" Zhouing didn't allow him to refute and drove the carriage home. On the way, he found that many people in town were driving or pushing all kinds of carts to Shanghe village to get water. She also saw a type of cart, but it wasn't really a cart in the traditional sense. It only had 2 wheels and a rack holding them together. On top of the rack, using the principle of balance, there was a wooden pillar as thick as a person's thigh. In front of the fulcrum were some ropes tied to it, which could be used to tie about 10 water buckets. The other end needed to be controlled by someone to move the cart forward. Except for being slightly slower, it was as efficient as an ox cart. "Sister-in-law, do you know what kind of cart that is?" Gu Qingxi asked curiously. "I don't know, but it looks pretty good. The inventor is quite smart." Zhouing shook her head. "Can we make one too? That way, we won't have to water the land manually daily." "You'll have to ask a carpenter. I'll go back and tell my father. Maybe it'll work." She didn't expect they would have built the same cart in the village the next day, which was much more exquisite than the one she had seen before. It also made the men in the village who carried water to the crops every day feel more at ease. Of course, after Gu Qingxi spread the word around, the villagers also knew about Gu Shengrui's injury. Chapter 270 Incoming Wolves 1. Therefore, each family brought some gifts to visit Gu Qingrui. Some gave eggs, some gave black noodles, some gave dried vegetables and cured meat. Even the patriarch, the village chief, and the Tian and Wang families had sent a hen that laid eggs. Zhouing accepted them all without any hesitation. Of course, she also returned the goodwill they received, giving each visiting family mung bean cakes and small snacks. In the blink of an eye, 7 days had passed. Gu Shengrui's injuries were finally almost healed. During these 7 days, Gu Qingxi studied while accompanying Gu Qingrui. Zhouing was relieved to see this. So, in addition to making lunch at noon, she spent the rest of her time making clothes and quilt covers. She even learned to make shoes from Sister Tian. Although life in the village was still tiring, it gradually stabilized. On this night, everyone was sleeping soundly when suddenly, a wave of rapid gongs and drums sounded, waking everyone up from their jerkams. "The wolves are coming down the mountain," someone shouted. "The wolves are coming down the mountain. All the men, wake up to defend against the wolves." This shout immediately woke everyone up. Since most of them were scared, the village was filled with crying and shouting. At the same time, Gu Qingrui also heard the shouts. He got up, put on his clothes, and said to Zhouing, "They'll go out and look at the situation. When I get out, lock the door. Don't open the door unless I call you. No, you haven't fully recovered from your injuries. I'll go with you." Zhouing shook her head. Gu Qingrui hesitated for a moment and thought of her inner space. He finally nodded and said, "Don't do anything stupid later. You must follow me closely, and if something goes wrong, quickly enter your inner space. By the way, get me a crossbow and 10 arrows. You be careful too. Don't get too close if you have nothing to do." After Zhouing reminded him, she took out the things for him and took out a large bag of tear-inducing powder, 2 bags of knockout powder, and a slingshot made of cow tendon. Seeing this, Gu Chungrui was worried and gave her a few more instructions. The couple then went out together. At that time, the outside was already brightly lit, and the streets were full of people with torches, most of them rushing to the foot of the mountain. The two of them looked at each other and immediately followed. When they arrived, they found that the men and the wolves were facing each other across a trench, with more than 10 dying wolves in the trench. At the same time, the smell of chili was so strong that they all sneezed. The wolves were obviously not feeling well either. Chapter 271 Incoming Wolves 2. The wolf pack became restless a moment later, and each wolf was howling miserably. Some even began to escape up the mountain, ignoring the alpha's orders. This time, the crowd could clearly see the number of wolves. Someone immediately cursed, "Damn it, including the ones in the trap. There are at least 100 wolves. This is a big wolf pack." Indeed, it seems like we really have to be careful. When everyone thought the wolves had retreated, the alpha wolf raised its head and howled. Although they did not know what it meant, the retreating wolves suddenly stopped and retreated to the vicinity of the Mother God temple to rest and reorganize. "Oh no, they're going to be here for an extended time," the patriarch cried out in alarm. The alpha wolf was also cursing internally. 2 days ago, when it attacked the sheep farm, it encountered that thing that choked its wolf. Today, it encountered it again. Such unlucky timing. However, it was impossible for them to retreat. The wolves under its command had not eaten properly for several days. If delayed any longer, they were likely to kill each other. For the sake of the alpha wolf's prestige and the stability of the wolf pack, they had to attack today. At least there were no bows and arrows here, so the wolves could wait for the smell to dissipate before attacking again. Thinking of this, the alpha quickly strode around the forest and decided on an attack plan. After about half an hour, Gu Chungrui saw that the wolves had no intention of retreating and immediately said, "Whoever has a bow and arrow, go home and take it. Also, bring oil or any strong wine you have." "By the way, uncle, is there any waste oil in the oil mill?" Gu Chungrui asked. "No, the bitter part of the oil was shared with the others." The patriarch shook his head. Oil was always a necessity, not to mention during a drought. Even fried pancake residue could not be found these days. "One person from each family," he continued. "Bring something that can be quickly ignited from your home. Let's fight the wolves together." After he finished speaking, he looked at Zhouing. "Zhouing, go and prepare some more chili powder." "All right," Zhouing responded and told Gu Chungrui of her task. She then turned around and walked home. When she got home, she took out a bag weighing about 10 pounds from her inner space and a jar of 140 proof sorghum wine. When she returned, there was a lot of firewood, wheat straw, and rotten branches on the ground along the trench. She gave the tear-inducing powder to Qian Shursan and handed the alcohol to the patriarch, saying, "Uncle, this is high-proof alcohol, and it will catch fire quickly. All right, leave the rest to me. You step back." The patriarch replied, then scattered the alcohol on the firewood bit by bit. The rest of the alcohol was made into torches. In the end, Gu Chungrui took out a packet of knockout powder and scattered it on the firewood. These knockout powders should be able to repel some of the wolves. "Let's retreat a little." "All right, everyone. Retreat to the village." After the patriarch finished ordering, they retreated a mile into the village. The alpha wolf on the opposite side saw their actions and smelled the alcohol, becoming increasingly anxious. It knew that everything they had set up was to deal with them, but it didn't know what they were doing. As for flammables like alcohol, they could smell them but didn't know what they were. After that, it raised its head and howled a few times. The green eyes moved quickly and then spread out to surround the village. In the river, there were the most wolves. There was no water in the river, so they quickly went down the mountain along the river. On the contrary, Very few wolves attacked from the front, but the alpha wolf led the pack. Oh no, we miscalculated. This alpha wolf is too cunning, the patriarch said. Chapter 272, Incoming Wolves 3. Those who have the chili powder, block the wolves to the left and right, Qian Shursen ordered. After that order, he brought a dozen people to the river with the chili powder. The other dozen or so went south. The patriarch immediately ordered someone to throw a torch on the firewood. The fire spread out, blocking the wolves from coming down the mountain like a great wall. The wolves that were charging forward immediately stopped. Those with bows and arrows, the chief hurriedly shouted, immediately go up houses or trees and stop the wolves from entering the village from a distance.
Yes.
5 or 6 people immediately left with their bows and arrows. The rest of the people quickly retreated to the village, looking for tools as they set traps. Gu Chengrui and Zhou Ying retreated to Tian Jiawang's house. After a short while, the wolves near the fire all fell into a daze. The alpha wolf howled in anger, and the wolves in front of it immediately began to move to the sides. Only the alpha wolf looked at the crowd coldly through the flame wall. At this moment, Tian Jiawang climbed up to his roof with his bow and arrow. He was shocked when he saw the situation outside. Good Lord, there are so many wolves. Yeah, we're in big trouble. Gu Chengrui turned his head and asked, by the way, have Qianyang and the others settled down? Yup. I've arranged for them to be sent to the underground cellar. That's great. Gu Chengrui looked at the river after he finished speaking. Because Qian Shursan and the rest obstructed the path, the wolf pack slowed down. However, the concentration of chili powder wasn't high enough, and the wolf pack soon began to advance on all fours. Seeing this, Qian Shursan started to lead them into a nearby trap. Suddenly, the wolves' howls rang out again. The village was so frightened that it was in chaos. The wolf's speed immediately slowed, and its movements became more vigilant. At that moment, a few wolves suddenly left the pack and quickly ran into the village. Tian Jiawang shouted, Brother Gu, it's our turn. After that, the 2 men quickly knocked their arrows and shot at the wolves. Zhou Ying used her slingshot to shoot a bag of knockout powder in front of the wolves. By the time the powder fell, the wolves were near them. A moment later, one of the 2 wolves died while the other was seriously injured. They left the team, and the rest of the wolves fell to the ground one after another before they could run far. Not bad, sister. Your aim is pretty good. Tian Jiawang praised in astonishment. He knew that she knew some martial arts and was good at them. He didn't expect her slingshot skills to be quite good, especially her eyesight. It wasn't something that could be learned overnight. No wonder Gu Chengrui dared to let her run into the mountains alone. It's mainly because of the excellent knockout powder's effect. Zhou Ying replied with a smile. Along the river, although Qian Shursan and the others were deliberately leading the wolves into traps, the number of wolves who fell for them decreased. Tian Jiawang and Gu Chengrui immediately took their bows and arrows and began to hunt the wolves, while Zhou Ying followed behind Gu Chengrui. She replenished her arrows and shot out more bags of knockout powder with her slingshot. In less than a quarter of an hour, the wolves were either stopped outside or had already rushed into the village. The 3 of them immediately found a stick each and quietly gave chase with their backs facing the village. Just as they were out of an alley, a wolf suddenly came from the corner and pounced directly at Zhou Ying. Zhou Ying immediately swung her stick at the wolf's neck. The wolf dodged it and turned to run. Tian Jiawang and Gu Chengrui turned around at the same time and rushed over. One hit the wolf's head, and the other hit the wolf's butt. Seeing this, Zhou Ying again rushed over and hit the wolf in the waist. 3 sticks came down, and the wolf didn't even have the chance to dodge before it was killed after 2 squeaks. Chapter 273, Incoming Wolves 4. The 3 looked at each other, smiled, and continued looking for wolves in the village. With the excellent teamwork from before, the 3 acted much faster than before. Just as the 3 killed 5 wolves in a row, a wolf's miserable howl suddenly came from the mountain. The howl was shrill and overbearing. Suddenly, the village was in chaos. The wolves originally hiding in the village began to jump out, followed by chaos everywhere. Oh no, that cry just now seemed to be the alpha wolves. Gu Chungrui cried out in surprise. Yes, if I'm not wrong, the alpha wolf is dead. I wonder who did it. Tian Jiawang agreed. No matter what, let's hurry up and kill the wolves. Otherwise, we'll have no end of trouble if we let them escape. Zhouing said, Yes, let's kill the wolves first. Let's head out of the village, since they must go up the mountain if they run. Gu Chungrui suggested. Sure. It's fine as long as the people in the village are fine with it too. Tian Jiawang nodded in agreement, and the three of them slowly walked toward the front of the village. As expected, the wolves quickly came out with things in their mouths. Most of them were carrying chickens and ducks, and some were dragging sheep. At the same time, the people in the village quickly surrounded them. They began to fight the wolves in pairs, and soon most of the wolves were killed by them. However, a few wolves still managed to get around their obstacle and run up the mountain. Just as the wolves were about to reach the foot of the mountain, dozens of arrows were shot from the top of the mountain, killing half of the remaining wolves in an instant. 3 more arrows were shot, and soon all the wolves fell dead. The village chief walked over and shouted, May I ask who the good Samaritan who helped us is? Do come out and let us thank you. You're too kind. As soon as the other party finished speaking, a group of people carrying some stuff came down the mountain quickly. When they got closer, the village chief realized it was Manager Liu and his men. They carried more than 20 wolf corpses on their backs, including the alpha wolf, who was the largest. Oh, Manager Liu, I really have to thank you for this. Otherwise, our village would be in constant chaos in the future. The village chief hurriedly stepped forward and thanked him. It's what we should do. We were originally chasing after this pack of wolves. How are you guys? Are there any casualties? Manager Liu asked after returning his thanks. I really don't have the number yet. At this point, the village chief turned his head and said, Everyone, take a look at each other. If you're injured, go to Dr. Gu for a check. The village will settle the bill. Are there any who died? He asked in a grave tone. Everyone looked at each other, but no one said anything because they were unsure if there were any casualties. The village chief heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. This meant that, as far as they knew, no one died. He gave his next order. Everyone has worked hard. Half of you will return to the village to check on each household situation. The other half, go collect the wolves' corpses. Remember to be careful since some might bite back when they're not completely dead. All of you, help collect the corpses too, Manager Liu said to the people behind him. In an instant, the large group of people split into 2 groups. One group scattered in all directions to collect the wolves' corpses, while the other group returned to the village with 5 injured among them. Grandpa Village Chief Uncle Gu Chungrui spoke up, Come to my house and wait for a while. You all have children at home, so it's best not to disturb them. Yes, let's go to Dr. Gu's house. I'm thirsty after running around the whole night. They'll ask for a cup of tea from him. Manager Liu chimed in. The village chief hesitated for a moment before nodding and saying, All right, they're still bandaging their wounds anyway and won't be able to sleep for a while. First, the village chief didn't have anything to entertain the guest with at home. Furthermore, by staying here, they could better find out about the casualties in the village. Chapter 274 Sharing the Meat After Returning Home. Zhouing made them a pot of tea. She also prepared them a plate of green bean cakes and steamed buns with mushrooms and chicken stuffing before she went to help Gu Chungrui. Manager Liu stood up and washed his hands. Then, he picked up a bun and said, The steamed buns look amazing. It seems like we're in for a treat. Stop talking and let's eat. It smells good. Seeing this, the village chief and patriarch couldn't wait any longer. They quickly went to wash their hands and started eating. After eating 2 buns, each the size of a child's fist, the 3 began chatting. At that time, the patriarch and the village chief also discovered that the wolves had attacked the Shaha village 2 days ago. However, the wolves were blocked by more tear-inducing powder and arrows, which was why they attacked this village. They also learned that the wolves were targeting their village because the animals heard the sound of gongs and saw the bright lights. I didn't expect even a wolf to know how to pick on a softer target, The village chief sighed when he heard this. Haha, you guys aren't pushovers. You all killed about 50 to 60 wolves. Manager Lu shook his head and smiled. It was also because we discovered that wolves were on the mountain that we dug more traps. Otherwise, it would have been problematic tonight. The village chief shook his head and asked, Manager Lu, have you been living in the manor in Shaha village all this while? He asked curiously. That's right. That's because of the sweet potatoes there. To put it bluntly, we're here to protect the sweet potatoes. I see. The village chief nodded his head in understanding. If the yield was, as Zhouing said, 10,000 pounds per acre of land, these white sweet potatoes were the country's treasure. Even if it yielded less than half the expected amount, it must still be protected. They owed the young couple a big favor. After all, it would take at least 3 years for them to figure out how to plant these white sweet potatoes on a large scale. After an hour, Qian Jiaxi and Gu Qinzhen walked in. After greeting the three, Qian Jiaxi said, other than losing some livestock, the villagers are all fine, as they hid in the cellars. As for the wolves' carcasses, there are a total of 93. Please take a look at them. He looked at Manager Lu at this point. Manager Lu and his men helped a lot tonight. Otherwise, the villagers alone wouldn't have been able to kill all the wolves. They couldn't monopolize all the stuff. We'll take 30 of them. You guys can decide on the rest. Manager Lu said it bluntly. Although wolf meat wasn't delicious, it was getting harder and harder to find food during a drought. He couldn't give up on this. Also, he didn't want to give them the impression that he was easy to brush off. Otherwise, it would create a bad precedent further down the line. They'll have to thank you, Manager Lu. The village chief nodded in satisfaction. They had killed nearly 30 wolves on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain, not to mention that they had helped them solve the problem of their village. So it was thoughtful of Manager Lu only to take away 30 wolves. On the other end, Gu Qingrui and Zhouing had almost finished treating the injuries of the injured. Then, the group went to the village and began to divide the meat. After removing the 30 wolves belonging to Manager Lu, the remaining 63 weighed about 3,300 pounds. Among them, those who came out to help tonight were first rewarded with 5 pounds of wolf meat. The rest who didn't come got 3 pounds per person. After discussing the distribution, everyone started to butcher the wolves. At this time, the village head found Gu Qingrui and his wife and suggested, I heard that you two used quite a lot of chili powder and other concoctions tonight. How about I give you 10 wolf skins as compensation? After the two of them looked at each other, Gu Qingrui nodded and said, Well, accept your arrangements, then it's a deal. But do you guys want to skin them yourselves, or prefer us to give them to you after we are done butchering? I'll do it myself. I've been quite free recently. Gu Qingrui answered. Chapter 275 Helping out after the items were distributed. The couple got half a wolf's worth of meat and 10 wolf skins. Gu Qingrui immediately found a cart and brought it back. Zhuang immediately barked madly after smelling wolf meat when they got home. When Zhouing saw this, she grabbed a rooster from her space and threw it at Zhuang. Calm down and have your meal. These are dead wolves. However, once Zhuang bit the rooster to death, he still barked at the cart. Zhouing had no choice but to put the cart and everything into her interspace. As soon as the smell of the wolf disappeared, Zhuang finally began to eat his chicken quietly. Gu Qingrui laughed. Zhuang, you're sure a good boy. You have the guts to bark at a wolf. Indeed, we didn't raise Zhuang in vain. Zhouing thought of its performance on the mountain and nodded in agreement. The next morning, the smell of meat wafted through the air from every house. Zhouing was also stewing the wolf meat in the kitchen, and theirs was the most fragrant one. Gu Qingxi sniffed all the way to the kitchen after he entered the house. Third sister-in-law, your cooking skills are really good. Just the smell alone is enough to make me die of hunger. I'll give you a bowl when it's cooked. Zhouing turned her head and said, Thank you, but I'm here on Grandma's orders. I'm here to ask for your help. Gu Qingxi scratched his head. Help? With the wolf meat? Zhouing was surprised. Yes, no one in the family knows how to cook it. So, they want you to go over and help. Zhouing got up and patted the dust off her apron. All right then, help me keep an eye on the fire. Remember to keep the fire low. We'll go and take a look. Don't worry. Leave this to me. Gu Chengxi patted his chest and said. After Zhouing left the kitchen, she went to the backyard to find Gu Chengrui, who was processing the wolf skin. She then took all the seasonings she needed and half a jar of lard to the old mansion. While waiting in the courtyard, Madame Chow saw her come in and immediately greeted her with a smile, saying, "It's been hard on you today. We really can't cook this wolf meat well. All right, they'll just stew it. This way, the taste will be decent. After it's done, you can cut it into pieces and make jerky or meat floss." Madame Chow nodded in agreement. "Okay, we will listen to you. We really can't swallow what we made otherwise." Zhouing went directly to the kitchen. After confirming that it was a whole wolf, she, Mrs. Sun, and Mrs. Guo began to get busy. When they started to stir up the base ingredients, Mrs. Sun asked in surprise, "Why did you use lard? Wouldn't that taste weird?" "No, lard itself doesn't have much taste. If you don't cook wolf meat with lard, the meat won't taste good and will be dry." Zhouing spoke as she got busy. "No wonder the pheasant I stewed last time was so dry and not fragrant at all." Mrs. Sun spoke with a new understanding. Stewed pheasant and wild rabbit are best to go with streaky pork. Only then will it be fragrant. We'll try it in the future. After Zhouing stewed the meat in the pot, she said goodbye to Madame Chow and went home. In the afternoon, Zhouing mixed a plate of purple perilla leaf salad, fried a plate of sweet potato vines, and cut a large plate of wolf meat. She told Gu Chengxi to stay over for a meal. After lunch, the village suddenly became lively. There were sounds of arguments and quarrels. In the end, the quarrels were drowned out by more banter. After Zhouing heard this, she walked out after wearing her shoes. She found a few groups of people fighting on the street. Some were making a scene, some were rolling around, and some were kneeling and begging for mercy. She was dazzled by the amount of stuff going on around the village. She walked over curiously. Sixth Aunt Gu, who had been watching the commotion in the crowd for a while, saw her and asked softly, "What do you think? You've never seen such a lively scene before, have you?" Chapter 276, The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat, 1. "I've never seen such a scene before." Zhouing shook her head. Even when her parents wanted something from her in her previous life, they would request it secretly. They would never make such a scene so shamelessly. "What's going on?" she asked curiously. "Why are there so many families making a scene?" To put it bluntly, it's all because of the wolf meat. After a whole morning of publicity by those who came to the village to fetch water, anyone related to someone here came to ask for meat. At this point, Sixth Aunt Gu pointed to a family in front of her and said, "This family was a daughter of this house's family who married off to another village, and she brought her whole family over." After that, she pointed to another place and said, "That's their daughter-in-law's family. They're all relatives here. What do you think their relationship will be like in the future?" No one's living the good life these days. To put it bluntly, it's all because of the drought. Indeed, I don't know when there will be heavy rain. The heavens certainly want to take our poor lives. Sixth Aunt Gu expressed concern. The problem was that the little underground water they had couldn't solve the root of the problem. The village would only get more and more chaotic as time went on. Zhouing didn't look forward to heavy rain after hearing it. As the saying goes, a long-term drought will lead to floods. If there was heavy rain now, who knows what might happen? Mother, I beg you, look at your grandsons. They've all lost so much weight. Please do us a favor and give us some meat. We'll be fine with some black flour if there's no meat. We're not picky." While wiping her tears, the woman who had been pushed to the ground said. Behind her knelt 3 children between the ages of 3 and 10, and behind the children stood a hunchbacked man with a bitter face. Looking at the skinny appearance of the family of 5, one could tell that their days were hard. But who wasn't? "You guys can go. It's not that I don't care about you, but the problem is that we aren't living well either." As she wiped her tears, the elderly woman in front of her said. After she finished speaking, she looked at another woman beside them. The woman didn't even look at her. Instead, she rolled her eyes and said, "What are you looking at? Our family only has a total of 8 acres of land. We only harvested 100 pounds of wheat from 5 acres of land. This amount of grain has to last us for a year. Do you want our entire family to starve to death?" She then looked at the kneeling woman and continued, "Sister, don't just think about your 3 children. You should also think about your nephews and our family. We have 2 households with a total of 6 children and 5 adults. We are only eating 2 meals daily and are only half full at every meal. How are we going to help you? If you really want to live, you can go up the mountain. There are wild vegetables, fruits, and leaves that can be mixed with low-grade flour. Although you won't be filled, you won't starve to death. Besides, it's not like your family is dying. Who can you blame if you can't make ends meet on your own? Hey, how can you say that? There are wolves on the mountain." The old lady said so angrily. "The wolf pack has long been wiped out." The woman laughed and then looked at the kneeling woman. "It's up to you whether you want to go or not. In any case, you won't be taking any of the food or meat with you." After that, she went home. The old woman was also in a difficult position and looked at the people around her. However, not only did the onlookers not help, they also quickly dispersed. If it was before, they might have spoken up for her or given her some things. However, in the current situation, no one knew when the drought would be over, so no one wanted to be implicated. Seeing this, Zhouing also immediately left. The old woman sighed and turned around to go home. Seeing this, the woman crawled to the ground and burst into tears. Chapter 277 The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat 2. When the 3 children saw this, they also burst into tears. The man of the family went forward, helped them up one by one, and took them out of the village without saying a word. On the other end, Zhouing had just returned home when she suddenly heard someone shout, "Help! Dr. Gu, help!" She was stunned for a brief moment and turned her head to look. She saw 2 young men carrying a bloodied man lying on a wooden board, running over quickly. Behind them was the staggering widow Hua. Zhouing was shocked. She quickly stopped Zhuang and said, "Just leave him in the courtyard. They'll go get my husband." After speaking, she ran into the house and briefly explained the situation to Gu Chengrui, saying, "Rui, I'm afraid we'll have to suture the person's wounds. You should get ready." Gu Chengrui immediately stood up. "Chengshi, go and get my first aid kit. I'll go and take a look." He washed his hands and walked out. When he saw the person on the ground covered in blood, he paused before saying to the 2 young men, "Bring 2 chairs out and put the wooden board on then." Afterwards, he walked over and squatted down, carefully checking the person's wounds. Gu Chengrui found that although his internal organs weren't injured, he had many external wounds and lost a lot of blood. He would probably bleed to death if he weren't saved in time. "Dr. Gu, how's my son-in-law's injury?" Widow Hua asked hurriedly when she saw Gu Yusheng stop. "He was sent here in time, so don't worry. But the weather is too hot, so you have to change his wound dressing more often." After Gu Chengrui explained, Gu Chengshi brought the first aid kit over. The 2 young men took 2 long stools from the house and placed the wooden board on them. Once that was done, the 2 men and Gu Chengshi cooperated with Gu Chengrui to clean and suture the wound. Zhouing handed a glass of boiled water to Widow Hua and said, "Auntie, sit down and have a glass of water. They won't be able to finish in a short time." "Sorry for your trouble," Widow Hua responded and took the glass of water. However, just as she was about to sit down, she immediately stood up and returned the glass to her. "No, Chunhong is still at home. I have to go back and look at her." After she finished saying that, she ran out in a hurry. Zhouing was stunned, but she didn't bother too much about it. Instead, she sat in the shed and drank the water. About 2 hours later, Gu Chengrui and the others had finally finished treating the wounds on Chunhong's husband, Guo Chengsong. After that, Gu Chengrui got the 2 young men to help him. They carried him to the bed in the west room and covered him with a clean quilt. "His injuries are too serious. He should stay here and be observed. Go back and tell Auntie Hua to pay 5 taels of silver for the consultation and medical fees first, and the rest will either be refunded or added on." 5 taels? This much? One of them exclaimed. The medicine and anti-inflammatory drugs alone cost 3 taels of silver, And this doesn't include the medicine to replenish his blood later, nor my fee. Gu Chengrui explained patiently. The two young men looked at each other and kept quiet. This was because they had seen 8 different-sized wounds on the patient's body. Medicine powder was sprinkled on the wounds constantly to stop the blood from flowing out, and the dressing was changed repeatedly. Thinking of this, the two of them nodded and turned to leave. Gu Chengshi looked at the exhausted Gu Chengrui and felt embarrassed to stay longer. He turned around and went home to eat. Seeing this, Gu Chengrui took the bloodied bandage and found Zhouing. "Babe, send me into the inner space. He needs a blood transfusion, or today will be dangerous for him." "No wonder you asked for 5 taels of silver." Zhouing paused before asking, "By the way, what do you want to eat for dinner?" "I'm going to cook now." Chapter 278 The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat 3. I don't have much of an appetite. Gu Chengrui shook his head. He was covered in the smell of blood for half a day on this hot day. If it weren't for the fact that he was experienced, he would have vomited. How could he still have the mood to eat? All right, then I'll see to it. Zhouing sent him into her interspace. Gu Chengrui did a blood test, found out that the patient was the most common type B, and gave him 200 cubic centimeters of blood from the warehouse. After the blood transfusion, Gu Chengrui went into the inner space to shower and change his clothes. He then sat opposite the living room and poured himself a glass of water while observing Wu Chengsong. On the other hand, Zhouing went to the kitchen and pondered for a moment. She took 2 cucumbers, some cold noodles, and some sauced beef from her inner space. After that, she prepared half a bowl of cold noodles, mixed them with the sauced beef, and split them into 2 bowls. After the meal, the blood transfusion was finished. Gu Chengrui saw that Guo Qingsong was starting to have a fever, so he had to mix an anti-inflammatory medicine with an antipyretic to give him an injection. Just as he was done, Widow Hua rushed over, sweating profusely. After entering the house, she handed Gu Chengrui 5 taels of silver and said, "Dr. Gu, how is my son-in-law now? He's starting to have a fever, but I've already given him medicine." Gu Chengrui took the silver and said. When Widow Hua heard this, she went straight to the west room. When she saw Guo Qingsong's abnormally red face, she knew it was true. Tears immediately flowed down her face. "Auntie, anyone who gets injured will have a fever. He's fine, so you really don't have to worry." Gu Chengrui followed her in. "Then I'll leave him to you. Chunhong might give birth at any time. I really can't leave." Widow Hua sobbed. "All right, I'll try my best." But Gu Chengrui nodded. "You guys rest. They'll come back tomorrow morning." After saying that, Widow Hua ran out in a hurry. Seeing this, Gu Chengrui reached out his hand and wanted to say something, but he gave up in the end. "What's the matter?" Zhouing asked curiously. "Do you want someone to send the patient back to the Hua family?" "No, it's good that he's here. It saves me the trouble of running back and forth on such a hot day. If I'm not wrong, there are knife and axe wounds on Guo Qingsong's body." So, after Zhouing heard this, she thought of the chaos in the village and then thought of the identity of Guo Qingsong's live-in son-in-law. She more or less had an idea in her heart. Sure enough, not long after, many women came to gossip. They also informed Zhouing that Guo Qingsong's parents and brothers in town had injured him. However, when they saw him fall, they immediately ran away. Chunhong's pregnancy had also been affected, and she was giving birth at home now. After a while, more people came to visit or get medicine. It also allowed Zhouing to listen to various families' gossip, and she discovered the problem here. Their village was being targeted. On the other side, the village chief went to the patriarch's house and said, "Qingji, what do you think we should do about the village issue? I'm afraid it'll be more chaotic if this continues. Sai, this is not easy to handle. Those who can come all have relatives here. We can't be too forceful." The patriarch replied, "That's true, but we can drive them away without using brute force. It's more troublesome to leave them here. They'll definitely cause more trouble when all these things happen in less than 3 days." The village chief expressed concern. Ever since their daughter's family returned, she and his daughter-in-law have been at odds with each other. His grandson was also dissatisfied with the rapid decline of the food at home. This conflict was getting ready to explode, and it would happen soon. We can only do this for now. After that, we'll strengthen the patrols to prevent anyone from doing anything sneaky. Once we capture someone, we can use that as a pretense. Chapter 279, The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat 4. That's right. We'll talk about it after someone exposes themselves. The village chief hesitated for a moment before asking, "What do you think about arranging for them to stay outside the village?" To put it bluntly, they'll only ask for meat and water. After the patriarch heard this, he felt conflicted. If things continued this way, there would be more people coming in one after another, and the village's safety wouldn't be guaranteed. However, when he thought of his daughter and put himself in her shoes, he really couldn't harden his resolve. He could only say, "I think we should discuss this matter with the constable. Even if we want to place these outsiders out of the village, we have to discuss how to do it and how to manage them. Otherwise, if there's any trouble, I'm afraid we won't be able to keep our heads." That's true. Let's go find the constable and see what he has to say. The village chief spoke after thinking for a moment. All right, let's go then. The patriarch got up and went with the village chief to find Constable Tion. Early the following day, Zhou and her husband had just finished their breakfast when Guo Song finally woke up. Gu Chengrui quickly went forward to help him up and asked, "How do you feel now?" "It's cold, and I need the toilet." Guo Song spoke in a low voice with a red face. "I'll help you there." Gu Chengrui helped him to the toilet. When they returned from the toilet, Gu Chengrui gave him half a bowl of millet porridge in the pot and said, "You should have a bite first, as you won't feel too cold after eating." "Thank you." Gu Song thanked Gu Chengrui and picked up the bowl to start eating. He finished it in one sitting after making sure it wasn't too hot. In the end, even though he had finished the porridge, he wasn't full. However, he also knew that Gu Chengrui had done his best to give him half a bowl of porridge, especially in the current year. He simply did not have the shamelessness to ask for more. "How's Chunhong?" he asked. "She didn't come to seek medical help, did she?" "No, but I heard that she's giving birth. I don't know if she's done or not." Gu Chengrui said. "What? But it has only been 8 months." Guo Song put down his bowl and said, "No, I have to go back and take a look. If you go back now, what else can you do other than cause trouble? It's better for you to get well as soon as possible. When you're better, you can go wherever you want. Besides, there's still Annie Hua at home. When Chunhong finishes giving birth, she'll definitely come to inform us." Gu Chengrui quickly stopped him. Guo Song still wanted to go home after hearing this, but without Gu Shengrui's support, he could not even walk. His view was fading, and he could faint at any time. He knew it was due to the lack of blood, so he didn't move again and sat down obediently. "You can't sit for too long in your current state. You should lie down." Gu Chengrui advised him and helped him lie down. Then, he grabbed a packet of medicine and went to the kitchen to boil it. After a while, Widow Hua came over with a basket. Sitting under the firewood shed and drying beans, Zhou saw this and greeted her. "Auntie, you're here. Brother Guo is already awake." "That's reassuring to hear. We'll go and take a look." Widow Hua immediately rushed into the house when she heard that. When he saw that Guo Song had woken up, she heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Ching Song, you're finally awake. You really scared me to death yesterday. I'm sorry for making you worry. I heard that Chunhong is giving birth. How is she now? Has she given birth?" Guo Song saw her come in and asked hurriedly, turning sideways to get out of bed. But halfway through, he pulled on his wound, and the pain made him break out in a cold sweat. Widow Hua immediately put down her basket and helped him to his feet. She did, but it's a girl. At this point, she looked at him nervously, afraid that he would dislike her granddaughter. Chapter 280, The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat 5. Although Guo Song was a little disappointed, he still smiled and said, "That's great. A flower must first bloom before it can bear fruit. In the future, when she grows up, she can help Chunhong take care of our other children." "That's right. Flowers must first bloom before they can bear fruit." Widow Hua nodded repeatedly. She took out a jar from her basket and said, "Since you were injured and Chunhong just gave birth, I slaughtered a chicken to cook a nourishing meal for you too. You should eat it while it's hot. I will bring you lunch at noon. Sorry for making you worry. Mother, have you eaten? I've left some chicken soup. We'll just make a bowl of chicken noodle soup later." After Widow Hua finished speaking, she filled a glass of water for him. "Sorry that you have to suffer here for 2 more days. Come home when you can take care of yourself. Otherwise, it'll be too hectic at home." "I'm sorry to trouble you." Guo Chung-song nodded. "We're family. No need to be so polite." After saying that, Widow Hua took the basket and walked out. Afterward, she said a few polite words to Zhou Ying and rushed home. When Guo Chung-song finished the small jar of chicken soup, he finally had his fill. Gu Shengru's bowl of medicine arrived shortly. After taking medicine, Guo Chung-song had just laid down when he heard the sound of a gong being struck. He heard someone shouting, "Each family, send someone to discuss matters under the big locust tree at the village entrance." Gu Chengrue was startled for a moment. He walked out and said, "Babe, you go ahead. I have to stay at home. There will be many people coming for their medicine." "All right, we'll go then. If they want us to make any big decisions, we'll discuss it when I get back." After Zhou finished speaking, she put the beans in her hand to dry, put her apron aside, and walked to the village entrance. When she arrived at the village entrance, she saw that many people were already gathered around the locust tree. Seeing her come over, everyone was stunned for a moment as they looked over in unison. Zhou was also feeling a little embarrassed, because the people sitting here were all men, and most of them were elderly. It was indeed quite jarring for her to stand here as a member of the opposite sex. "Zhou, is Chengrue not coming?" the patriarch asked. "Yes, we have a patient at home, so he can't leave," Zhou replied. When she said this, everyone remembered that the Hua family's son-in-law had been almost beaten to death and was staying at their house. "How's Guo Chung-song's injury? Has he woken up yet?" someone asked immediately. "He's awake. He'll be fine after a good rest because it's mostly just external injuries," Zhou replied. "That's good." Let's quiet down and start the meeting. After the patriarch finished speaking, he looked at Tian Jingzhong and the village chief and retreated to the side. Tian Jingzhong looked at the village chief and said, "You should announce it. I'll add on if there's anything." The village chief nodded, and then talked about everyone's relatives staying in the village. "Everyone saw what happened yesterday. I wonder what you all think." As soon as he finished speaking, someone immediately echoed, "What else do we think? Of course, we should be chasing them out. Although our village is in a better state than others, we are also at a point where we are unsure whether we will be able to eat another meal. If those people stay any longer, we'll be squeezed dry to our last drop of blood." "You can't say that. They're all our family. We can't just watch them starve to death." "Indeed, it's better to help if we can. That's nice of you to offer, but are you willing to house them? Don't get yourself into trouble when you can't even have a meal for dinner." Chapter 281, The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat. 6. Soon, the people were divided into 3 groups. One group was against it, mainly because of their daughter-in-law's family coming over. Another group was firmly in support, primarily because it was their daughter's family staying with them, while the majority stayed silent. "That's enough. Shut up. We're here to discuss matters, not quarrel." The village chief knocked on the gong and shouted. He continued after the crowd had quieted down. "All right, those who agree to let their relatives stay in the village, raise your hand." After hearing this, everyone looked at each other for a moment. In the end, a few people raised their hands. "It seems like most people still don't agree," the village chief affirmed with a nod. "Wait, village chief, we're the only place with water. If we chased them away, wouldn't we be killing them?" One of the people raised his hand and asked. "That's right, village chief. It's our family. We can't just watch them as they starve to death." "Indeed, we can't be too extreme in this matter. What are you saying? We aren't even stopping the people from drawing water from our village." "That's right. The villages within 10 miles line up daily to get water from here. It's not that we don't allow them to take our resources. We just don't want them to live in our village. The village chief saw they were quarreling again, so he struck the gong and reprimanded, "All right, all of you shut up. Since everyone is clear about the pros and cons here, let's talk about the constable and my opinions. If you want to keep your relatives in the village, we really can't say much if you're bent on it." However, whoever stayed had to guarantee these 2 points. First, if the people who stayed behind ruined anything, you have to be responsible for the compensation. Second, if there's a conflict in your family, don't look for us because we won't and can't mediate your troubles. Go back and discuss this matter. If you're willing to vouch for your relatives, come to me and write a contract of promise. Everyone fell silent. They could guarantee the first condition, but no one could be sure of the second condition. After all, those who could be the head of a family were basically the grandfathers of their families. It was normal to have some friction in any family, let alone in a disaster. If someone started a fight, would they be able to suppress it? Even if they could suppress their daughter's family, being her parents, it was unclear whether they could do the same for their daughter-in-law's parents. At the thought of this, no one was confident that their family would be able to follow this agreement to its absolute. "Village chief, what is your family's plan?" Someone asked curiously because everyone knew that his daughter had returned home. The village chief didn't answer his question but said, "This is precisely why we called everyone over. We want everyone to gather our relatives who have come from afar to live in the warehouse on the dock in town. As for those close to home, just ask them to go home directly. This is for the best. If the family makes a big scene, it won't look good for everyone." The warehouse? That's too far. Someone expressed their dissatisfaction. Indeed, it's at least 4 to 5 miles away. Is it far? Don't the townspeople come here every day to get water? Tian Jingzhong stated this at the time. We're all born farmers, and we aren't asking them to water the land. Even a girl can carry 2 to 3 small buckets of water from 5 miles away daily. The village chief agreed. Why don't we let them build a shack outside the village? Someone asked. Yes, isn't it good to build a shack outside the village? A shack? The village chief asked in return. Is a shack more comfortable and safer than a warehouse? Don't forget how close we are to a mountain. Disregarding all the different kinds of poisonous bugs, let's talk about the wolf pack from the night before. Would a shack stop a wild beast if another came down the mountain? If something really happens, who's going to be responsible? Chapter 282, The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat. 7. We have to be careful. Disasters are happening everywhere, and the mountain isn't particularly peaceful. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a large pack of wolves coming down the mountain. Tian Jingzhong agreed. When everyone heard this, they immediately wilted. If they really thought about it, it wasn't impossible for something to happen. Does anyone else have any more objections? If not, go back and discuss it. Well, decide on the arrangement. You have to give me a reply in the afternoon. The village chief said. After the crowd discussed a little more, they all turned around and went home. Just as Zhouing was about to leave, the village chief shouted, "Zhouing, wait a moment." He politely said a few words to Tian Jingzhong, sent him away, and walked to Zhouing. "Grandpa Qian, what's the matter?" Zhouing went straight to the point. "I remember that Qian Zhuang was working for you. Do you know where he is now? I have something to discuss with him." "Qian Zhuang? He's in the manor with Manager Liu and the others to protect the white potatoes. I'll go and call him over now." "I'll go with you." "I'll go too," the patriarch said. He knew very well that the village chief would ask Qian Zhuang to lend his daughter a house to live in. It just so happened that Gu Erjiang's house was also empty. If someone in their clan could borrow it, he could settle 1 or 2 households in the village. "Let's go and come back early. The weather should be getting hot soon." Zhouing responded, and then the 3 rushed directly to the manor. Finally, in the white potato field, they found Qian Zhuang and the others, who were rummaging through the white potato vines. Zhouing called them over and said, "The village chief and the patriarch are looking for you too." After speaking, she bade the village chief and the patriarch farewell, walking toward the white potato field. The 2 of them wiped the sweat off their foreheads and asked, "Third grandpa, village chief, Uncle Gu, first uncle. What are you looking for us for? There's something we want to discuss with you too. I didn't expect you guys to work so hard. How is it? Have you saved enough money to marry? If you have enough, we'll be your matchmaker. With a smile, the village chief said. The two of them immediately blushed and scratched their heads. We have saved enough, but let's wait until the drought is over and we renovate our house. It looks like you two are quite ambitious. The village chief paused for a moment before saying with a smile. To be honest, I'm here to rent your house for your Antlands family, he said to Qianzhuang. My house? My house is in such ruins that you can see the sky at night. Qianzhuang was stunned by his request. I know, but it's still livable after some simple repairs. I just wonder if you'll suddenly return to the village. Qianzhuang went silent for a moment. If Aunt Lan is staying, then I won't go back for the time being, he said. They'll return when the house can be renovated in the spring. Are you sure? I'm sure. Staying in the manor is a better life for a single man like me. At least there's someone to talk to at night, and there are always ready-made meals to eat. Then it's settled. How about I rent the house for 1 tael of silver every 6 months? No need. You've been taking care of me all these years. You can always help me when I'm renovating my house next year. All right, then leave the house repairs to me. They'll find you a beautiful wife in the future. With a smile, the village chief said. They'll be waiting. Qianzhuang smiled and nodded. After hearing what they said, Gu Erjiang looked at the patriarch and asked, Uncle, you're also here for the house? Yes, the patriarch nodded and told him about the situation in the village. Don't worry. We'll vet those who rent your house. We won't let anyone with bad character stay in the village. The patriarch paused for a moment before continuing. Of course, it's also possible that no one would rent it. Chapter 283 The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat. 8. Gu Erjiang nodded and replied, Uncle, you can see the arrangements. In any case, there's nothing valuable at home. But HL make this clear. After the drought is over, they have to move out as soon as possible. All right, do your best here, and he'll ask your aunt to find you a good wife. The patriarch patted Gu Erjiang's shoulder. I'll leave it to you then, uncle. Gu Erjiang smiled as he spoke. After that, the 4 men walked around the field. When they ran into Manager Liu, the village chief asked in surprise, Manager Liu, I didn't expect you to come to the fields yourself. Since I'm free, it's good to exercise my muscles and bones. At this point, Manager Liu pointed at a white potato and continued. How's the growth of these white potatoes looking to you? It's pretty good. It looks better than the ones in the village. The village chief bent over and took a look. It's mainly because we have sufficient fertilizer. Manager Liu wiped his sweat and said, Let's go. Come to my place and sit for a while. Maybe another day. The village is in a mess now, and we must return as soon as possible. Problems brought by the wolf's meat? The village chief took a breather before giving the thumbs up. Yeah, many of the villagers' relatives have come to the village suddenly. More and more will come to the village in the future. You guys have to be more careful. The village chief nodded in agreement. You go on ahead. They'll come to find you for a few drinks when we are free. Zhouing also came back after checking out the fields. After exchanging a few polite greetings, the 3 of them hurried back to the village. After returning, they found that the streets were full of people. Children were crying, and the adults were making a scene, making the place even more lively than fireworks during the new year. All right, let's go hide at Constable Tion's place. The village chief quickly turned around and said, Indeed, this isn't our problem. The patriarch immediately followed and said. Seeing this, Zhouing shook her head and smiled, then walked home. When she entered her home, she saw Gu Zi playing catch with her 2 children in the yard. She was stunned for a moment and asked, Big sister, why are you staying outside? Isn't there a man outside in the house? We can play in the yard. Gu Zi turned her head and said, All right, do take a rest while I go get you some water. After Zhouing finished speaking, she went back into the house. She took a small table and 4 chairs and placed them in the shade of the courtyard. She then went to the kitchen, made them a pot of chrysanthemum tea, took out a plate of biscuits, and placed them on the table. Huan Huan, Lele, take a break and drink water before you continue playing. Auntie, we're coming, Huan Huan replied. She brought Lele into the house to wash their hands, then ran back and sat on the small bench. They slowly ate and drank their fill. Zhouing smiled and took a sip of tea before asking, Big sister, are you used to living in the village? It's nice. The days in the village were peaceful and quiet. Gu Zi said with a smile. That's good to hear. In the future, when you're free, bring the children out to play more often. Zhouing nodded and suggested. When she lowered her head again, the two little girls had almost finished half a pound of biscuits on the plate. Take the rest. They'll help you refill them. Zhouing stood up. No need. They've already eaten a lot. Gu Zi spoke quickly. After that, she even glared at her two daughters, angry that they didn't know how to be more reserved when at someone else's house. It was as if she had starved them. Mom, it's delicious. Lele frowned and carefully replied. After she finished, she handed her mom a biscuit. You too, it's fine. How much can the two children eat? They'll be back soon. After Zhouing comforted her, she turned around and went to the warehouse. This time, she brought a plate full of small biscuits. She even packed them with 6 pieces of mung bean cake. Let's just wait for a while. We'll do something when we harvest those sweet potatoes. Okay, I've also seen people fight to the death for a little bit of food, while we're guarding a treasure vault and watching helplessly. It just doesn't feel good. If I didn't know better, I would have thought I had been a great philanthropist for 10 lifetimes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have met you. Just as Gu Chungrui finished speaking, a dark and thin girl around 14 or 15 years old suddenly rushed in and said, Dr. Gu, Manager Zhou, please. Before she could finish her sentence, Erzhuang suddenly pounced on her. Erzhuang, Zhouing called out. However, Erzhuang still pounced on her. However, he didn't hurt her and quickly left. Zhouing saw this and quickly went forward to help the girl up. Girl, who are you? Do we know you? The lady was stunned for a moment. I am Zhang Qingqing, the eldest daughter of Zhang Desheng. Manager Zhou, please buy me and give me a way out. Otherwise, they'll be sold to a retard. Chapter 283 The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat, 10. Zhang Desheng? Who's that? Zhouing asked in confusion. Gu Chungrui found the name familiar, but he could not recall where he had heard it. Zhang Qingqing looked at the two's reactions and felt both angry and wronged. She immediately shouted, You two are too heartless. My father died for your family, and you've already forgotten his name. What nonsense are you talking about? I don't remember anyone dying for us. Zhouing replied in an unpleasant tone. Gu Chungrui thought of something. He stood up and asked, Is your father Zhang Desheng, the one who died at the hands of the Chao family on a ship in the winter 2 years ago? At least you guys have some conscience. Zhang Qingqing heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at Zhouing and said, I know your restaurant's business is good. Please save me and buy me. They'll be your slave. Otherwise, they'll be sent down a dead-end road. As soon as she finished speaking, someone immediately chased her over. Seeing the situation in the courtyard, the leading woman went forward and pulled Zhang Qingqing up. You bitch, how dare you to run? How dare you rebel against me? Let me go, let me go. Zhang Qingqing saw the woman and immediately shouted in fear. However, she was just a young girl who couldn't escape the woman's grip. In the end, she bit the back of the woman's hand. The woman screamed and let go of her hand, while Zhang Qingqing immediately hid behind Zhouing. This gave Zhouing a headache. At that moment, a white-haired man walked in and said, Dr. Gu, Manager Zhou, sorry to have caused you trouble. Sorry for bothering you. We'll take her back now. No, I'm not going back. Grandpa, please don't sell me to my aunt's family in exchange for food. Zhang Qingqing immediately shouted. Zhouing was also stunned when she heard that. She turned her head and asked, It's not your parents who want to sell you. No, my mother and brother didn't agree to sell me. They've already locked them up. Shut up. You're not in a position to speak. Zhang Laosan looked at Zhang Qingqing and scolded her. Manager Zhou, I'm sorry for the trouble, he said to Zhou. After he finished speaking, he walked past her and was about to grab Zhang Qingqing. Gu Chungrui grabbed his arm and spoke up. As far as I know, when selling someone in the Ming dynasty, one must have their parents' signatures. What you're doing is against the law. Zhang Laosan was stunned for a moment and replied with a stiff face, her father is gone. As her grandfather, I've raised her for so many years. How can I not have the right to do that? But she still has a mother. Gu Chungrui stared at him firmly. You? Zhang Laosan was so angry that he wanted to raise his hand and beat him up, but he didn't dare to offend Gu Chungrui. Otherwise, if he had a headache or fever in the future, he wouldn't even have a place to get medicine. However, the woman who had captured Zhang Qingqing before, Aunt Zhang, didn't have the same concerns. She directly came up and said, "What does it have to do with you guys?" After she finished speaking, she tried to push Zhou. However, Zhou had practiced martial arts before. Not only was Aunt Zhang unable to push Zhou down, but she was also pushed away. The woman stumbled back 2 steps and collided with Zhuang. Zhuang was so frightened that he took 2 steps back and pounced on her. After pushing her down, he pressed his 2 front legs against her chest and bared his teeth at her while barking. Aunt Zhang saw the sharp teeth in Zhuang's mouth that shone under the sun and was so scared that she didn't dare to move. She could only close her eyes and shout, "Help! Help! Father, please save me!" Ha ha ha! Suddenly, there was a burst of laughter. Zhou looked up and found that many people surrounded their courtyard. Chapter 283 The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat 11. Zhang Laosan hurriedly said to Gu Chungrui, "Dr. Gu, quickly make your dog let her go." "Don't. I think it's good like this. It's much quieter." Gu Chungrui smiled as he spoke. "Fellow villagers outside the door, please help me find the village chief." "All right, they'll go immediately." A young man responded and immediately ran away. "You." Zhang Laosan looked at Gu Chungrui angrily. Gu Chungrui immediately turned his head. "No matter what, you guys did not consider this properly. To avoid us getting implicated in the future, let's wait for the village chief to come first." He sat back down and continued drinking his tea. Seeing this, Zhou also sat back down. As for Zhang Qingqing, she followed Zhou closely because she knew she was the only one who could save her now. When Zhang Laosan saw this, he immediately stepped forward and wanted to kick Zhuang away. Zhuang barked when he saw this and immediately lowered his head to bite Aunt Zhang's shoulder. "Don't you dare," Zhang Laosan said quickly, taking 2 steps back. Zhuang turned around and stared at him. Then, he looked at Gu Chungrui and his wife, who were drinking water at the side. He whimpered twice and then climbed directly onto Aunt Zhang's body. It was fine if she didn't move, but once she moved or Zhang Laosan moved, Zhuang would immediately stand up and open his maw to try biting them. The father and daughter were so scared that neither of them dared to move. "Dr. Gustog is quite smart," the people outside commented. "Those who don't know any better might mistake him for a human. Not only is he smart, but he sure looks strong. Look at his fur. It's so smooth. I wonder how they raise him." Needless to say, he definitely had good meals. Zhang Laosan has gone too far. Is he really selling his granddaughter to help his daughter's family? Isn't he helping an outsider? This is fate. Uncle Dasheng wasn't well-liked when he was alive. Zhang Laosan's daughter was also born late. She was doted on when she wasn't married and has been doted on since then. As the saying goes, the in-law family is like a dog that leaves after eating. No matter how good you are to them, they'll be an ungrateful wolf sooner or later. They'll see who will care about Zhang Laosan when he's old. Who will? Wouldn't his daughter or grandson care for him? What are you saying? How would an outsider care for an old man with no money or power? Who can say for sure? When Zhang Laosan heard the people outside teasing him, he was instantly furious. He walked directly to the door and said, "If you guys have nothing better to do, then scram." Our family's matters are none of your business. You're saying it as if we want to care. Even if you're paralyzed and lying on the ground, we won't bother saving you. That's right. I'm afraid that when you're really lying in bed in the future, your children and grandchildren won't care about you. Miserable. You guys shut up. Zhang Laosan clenched his fist and roared. What? Are you afraid of people talking about you? You've already lost all your dignity. Motherfucker, you're full of shit. I'm going to teach you a lesson today. Zhang Laosan cursed out loud and quickly punched the other party in the face. The young man's face darkened. He grabbed his arm and said, You old fart, do you really think I won't dare return the punch? All of you, stop. Do you all have nothing better to do? As he walked over angrily, the village chief shouted. There were many people following behind to watch the fun. Village chief, you're finally here. This Zhang Laosan is really a piece of trash. Back then, Uncle Desheng was such a good man. He raised their entire family by himself and even left them 60 taels of silver after his death. But what about them? They not only buried him in a cheap coffin, but they also wanted to sell his daughter to a retard. Isn't this a sin? The young man said it with righteous indignation. Chapter 283 The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat 12. Indeed, Uncle Dasheng was such a good man back then, but his wife and daughter ended up like this. It's really sad. All right, you guys move aside first. They'll go in and take a look. After the village chief finished speaking, he pushed them away and ignored Zhang Laosan as he entered the courtyard. He saw Zhuang climbing onto Aunt Zhang's body like a tiger. He was shocked as he exclaimed, Whoa! What's going on here? Chengruwei, hurry up and get Zhuang up, he said to Gu Chengruwei. Isn't this for peace and quiet? Gu Chengruwei stood up and patted Zhuang's head. Good job. I'll make you something good tonight. Woof woof. Zhuang immediately stood up and barked happily, then wagged his tail around him. Aunt Zhang crawled up, but her legs were as soft as noodles. She just stood up before sitting back down again. The group of onlookers immediately laughed and said, being timid, How'd you get the guts to do things like human trafficking? Isn't this because she has a backer? Look, she peed in her pants. The ground is wet. Really? It's so embarrassing. Let's see if she still dares to act all haughty. You bastards, shut up. Aunt Zhang shouted in embarrassment. Zhang Laosan wanted to raise his hand and hit someone. The group of young men wanted to continue goading them, but the village chief raised his hand and said, All right, shut up. Let's talk about serious matters first. After he finished, he looked at Zhang Laosan and said, I heard that you're going to sell Zhang Qingqing in exchange for food for your married daughter. Village chief, we're not selling her. We're suggesting a marriage to her. It's just that the betrothal gift has been changed to food. Zhang Laosan replied with a dry laugh. Yes, yes. Zhang Qingqing is already of marriageable age. We're talking about her marriage. Aunt Zhang quickly echoed. Talking about marriage? You introduced me to a retard, someone who killed 2 of his wives. Zhang Qingqing roared in anger. Nonsense. Who told you that he killed someone? They were the ones who died of illness. Aunt Zhang immediately rebuked Zhang Qingqing. At the same time, she felt a little uneasy. If this matter were to spread to the groom's family, she wouldn't have a good ending. Your good son told me. If he hadn't let it slip, I wouldn't have known that you guys were this cruel. You clearly wanted to kill me. Shut up. How can you talk to your elders like that? At this moment, an older man with white hair and a walking stick walked in. Zhang Laosan's face turned ugly when he saw the man. Big brother, why did you come here? If I didn't come, how would I know that you bastards could do such a shameless thing? Zhang Laosan, you've really brought shame to our Zhang family. Zhang Laoda expressed his disappointment. All right, since you're the head of the family, I think you should handle this matter. Seeing this, the village chief retreated to the side and sat at the table to drink a cup of tea. Zhang Laoda's mouth twitched when he saw this, but he didn't refute it. Instead, he looked at Zhang Qingqing and said, Let's go home and discuss this. Don't disturb Dr. Gu here. Will eldest grandfather really help me out? Zhang Qingqing asked nervously. Of course. If he dares to mess around, they'll break his legs. After Zhang Laoda finished, he glanced at Zhang Laosan and turned around to leave. Seeing this, Zhang Qingqing immediately followed him and helped Zhang Laoda out of the house. When Zhang Laosan and his daughter saw this, they looked at each other and followed. At that moment, the village chief stood up. All right, you're all dismissed. Go and busy yourselves with your stuff. Chapter 283 The Problem Brought by Wolf Meat, 13. Everyone immediately left when they heard this, but they didn't disperse. Instead, most of them followed the Zhang family to watch the show. When the village chief saw this, he shook his head and followed. Zhang Laosan was a hooligan, and the village chief was afraid that he would do something even more shameless. It didn't take long for the news to spread in the village. Under Zhang Laoda's pressure and the village chief's witness, Zhang Qingqing's mother and her 2 children took 20 taels of silver, 10 pounds of black flour, a sack of dried vegetables, and 2 acres of land. They went to Zhang Lauer's family, Zhang Laosan's older brother. Zhao Lauer had died but hadn't left behind a child. As for Aunt Zhang, when the village chief asked Zhang Laosan to sign a guarantee agreement, she was opposed by the whole family, so she had to leave. In the evening, all the outsiders in the village had left. Only the village head's children, 6th Aunt Gus's daughter, and Gu Ziwen's family were left behind. They moved into the homes of Qian Zhuang and Gu Erjiang. At night, after Guo Qingsong's condition had stabilized, he didn't want to stay here anymore. Gu Qingrui had no choice but to send him back after changing his wound dressing. Just as they left, Zhang Qingqing came to visit again. Zhouing looked at the purple mark on her forehead and was stunned for a moment. Dr. Gu isn't here. Let me treat your wound. Thank you, Zhang Qingqing said after a pause. After she thanked Zhou Ying, she followed her into the house. After she had her wound treated, she knelt and requested, Manager Zhou, please buy me. Otherwise, the 3 of us won't be able to live. That's impossible, Zhou Ying replied without hesitation. The situation outside was probably much more serious than what she had seen. If she started this trend, she was sure that a long line of people would come to her to buy them the next morning. There may even be parents who throw their children at their front door. However, she didn't want to cause more trouble and couldn't expose her inner space, so she would never take anyone in. Zhang Qingqing's face was full of despair after hearing this. The 10 pounds of black flour they got were only enough for the 3 of them to eat for 10 days. But what were they going to do after that? Thinking of the 20 taels of silver at home, she raised her head and said, Can Manager Zhou sell us some food? Zhou Ying shook her head. My restaurant closed because I couldn't collect more raw ingredients. So I can't do anything about providing you with food. I don't want black flour or rice, just wheat, bran, and the like. When Zhou Ying heard her say this, she quickly thought of Zhang Qingqing's situation and knew she was at a dead end. I don't have anything you said, Zhou Ying said after a brief pause. But I have some leftover tofu dregs here. Do you want it? Tofu dregs are fine too, as long as they're edible. All right, wait a moment. After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she turned around and went to the kitchen. She took out a sack of tofu dregs from her interspace and put it in front of Zhang Qingqing. You can take a look at them. They're all dried. Although they're not very fresh, they're still edible. Zhang Qingqing's eyes lit up when she saw the sack's contents. She opened it and grabbed a handful of it. As expected, it was dry and ready for eating. She then sniffed it. Other than the smell of sunlight, there was no moldy smell at all. This was a lifesaver in this drought. Manager Zhou, how much will you sell the tofu dregs for? She quickly asked. 2 coppers per pound. Zhou Ying hesitated for a moment. Thinking of her situation, she gave Zhang Qingqing a fair price. Zhang Qingqing was stunned for a moment. She quickly bowed and said, Thank you. I've caused you trouble today. If you need my help in the future, just let me know. Flour mixed with grass in town was sold for 5 coppers per pound, and there was a limited amount. Such a price for the tofu dregs was a steal. Chapter 289, The Arrival of the Refugees. You're welcome. I can only help you this much. You'll have to rely on yourself in the future. Only when you can stand on your own will your lives be better. I understand. Thank you. Zhang Qingqing nodded. How many do you have left? She asked. This is what was left from before. There's no more. Zhouing paused for a moment, and her eyes turned cold. Oh. Zhang Qingqing didn't notice the change in her tone and only responded disappointedly. Only then did Zhou Ying's expression improve. The two of them waited and found that the tofu dregs weighed about 80 pounds. After Zhou Ying helped her carry it back, she received the money for the tofu dregs and medicine before returning home. On the surface, the village was peaceful again, but more people came to steal things at night. Fortunately, due to the appearance of the wolves, the patrol team didn't withdraw, and they also added an additional unit to patrol the village. Because of the traps, the thieves returned empty-handed. In the blink of an eye, it was the 8th day of the Lunar New Year. Zhou Ying steamed the longevity peach buns and cake for Guzi early in the morning and also a tray of milk-flavored black buns. When Guzi arrived, Zhou Ying gave her the birthday cake, peach buns, and 50 tiny steamed buns. These small steamed buns are a little token of my appreciation. Please pass them on to Uncle. I wish him a long and healthy life. Guzi was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect Zhou Ying to prepare a birthday gift for her father, and she couldn't reject it. Accepting it for free was also inappropriate, so she could only say, "You guys should come over and have some fun." No, it's all right, as it's been tough on everyone these days. As long as eldest uncle doesn't mind my gift, it's fine. How can that be? Not many people are willing to steam black buns nowadays. It's good that you don't mind. You should hurry back. Guzi saw her firm attitude and didn't say anything more. She left after exchanging a few polite words. However, at noon, Mrs. Wang personally delivered a longevity peach bun and a bowl of chicken mushroom stew to her. The next day, Gu Chungrui continued to visit his clinic while Zhou Ying brought Zhuang up the mountains once again. When they reached the mountain, they were shocked by what greeted them, not to mention the wild vegetables. Even the tree bark and leaves were almost all gone. They couldn't even find a single piece of firewood. As they walked further up, they saw groups of people busy on the mountain. People were living in the Mother God Temple, and many of them were there. Seeing this, Zhou Ying didn't dare go up the mountains any further. After coming down from the mountains, she found the patriarch and asked, "Uncle, do you know who those people on that mountain are?" "Most of them are refugees from the northern part of our county. I heard there are not even grass-made noodles for sale there now, so they went up the mountains to look for food." The patriarch sighed, "But if they continue to do this, if it rains heavily, there might be landslides and mudslides. Our village will be in danger then." The patriarch was stunned for a moment and answered with a bitter smile, "What can we do? We don't have any food to give them. Even Constable Tion can't do anything about it. As long as they don't peel off the bark of the tree trunks and leave the crown intact, it will be fine. It's the same as giving the tree a makeover, such as trimming the leaves." The patriarch's eyes lit up. That's right, as long as the tree stayed safe. It was okay if those refugees took the small branches. As for the leaves, there was no need to care. At the thought of this, he immediately stood up. "I know what to do. The mountain is not peaceful now. You must not go up the mountain again." After he finished speaking, he ran out in a hurry. Seeing this, Zhou Ying returned home. Chapter 290, A Passing Storm. On the other side, many refugees had appeared in the mountains near the manor. However, for the safety of the white potatoes, cattle, and sheep in the manor, Manager Liu transferred another group of people over to protect it. In the afternoon, Tianjingzhong took a team of soldiers with knives, axes, and saws up the mountain. According to Zhou Ying's opinion, he asked the refugees to act according to the law, or they would be executed. With the soldiers' forceful intervention, the refugees obediently listened, even if they had complaints. Half a month later, the outer area of the mountains had significantly changed. No matter how tall the trees were, they had all been trimmed until only the treetops were left. Overall, the mountain looked bald. Zhou also took the opportunity to spend money on a batch of firewood and save it in the courtyard. She used the larger branches to build a firewood shed in the backyard. One day, Zhou had just finished watering the sweet potato field when a gust of wind suddenly blew. Dark clouds were quickly passing over from the northeast to the southwest. In an instant, dust and sand flew all over the sky, and the sky went dark. The villagers were all overjoyed at the sight of it. This was because the village's elderly firmly believed this was the wind before the rain. Sure enough, after about 15 minutes, raindrops the size of peanuts fell. When it hit their bodies, they could feel the pain. Those raindrops that hit the windows each created a hole. But the village was full of joy, even mixed with happy cries. However, the rain soon passed. The rain did nothing but wet the ground slightly and couldn't even form a small stream. In an instant, the village was filled with miserable cries. "It seems we won't be able to get through this drought for a while," Zhou sighed. She looked down and saw that her clothes were covered with yellow dust. She touched her face and felt the sand and dust on it. Zhou had no choice but to close the door and take a shower in her interspace. Following that, the villagers became even more depressed and focused on serving the only food available, white sweet potatoes. Another half a month had passed, and the sweet potatoes had already begun to protrude from the ground along with dry cracks. Those with no food at home had no choice but to dig them out prematurely for their meals. The victims of this disaster also began to have ideas about those remaining white potatoes. After the village chief realized something was wrong, he immediately asked Tianjingzhong for help. After all, they would have to rely on these white potatoes to ensure they wouldn't go hungry in the following months. Tianjingzhong couldn't suppress all these refugees, so he had to transfer all the officers and soldiers over, along with some who knew some martial arts from the refugees, to guard the white potatoes in the village. At noon, Zhou had just mixed some cold noodles when she suddenly heard someone in the courtyard say, "It seems we have come at the right time. I could smell the lovely smell from far away." Zhou was stunned for a moment after hearing Zhou Weiming's voice. She quickly put down the cold noodles and walked out, and sure enough, she saw Zhou Huiming and manager Lu walking in. "When did you come over to our village?" She stepped forward and asked. "Just last night. I just took a nap and came to see you." Zhou Huiming answered with a smile. Zhou thought to herself that he was probably here for the food. Thinking of this, she asked, "What do you want to eat for lunch?" "I'll go make it now." "I don't have the right to choose what to eat at a time like this. Do as you see fit. It's fine as long as you can satisfy our hunger." "All right, you guys sit in the living room, and I'll be back soon," Zhou said as she returned to the kitchen. In addition to the cold noodles, she made stir-fried preserved meat with green garlic seedlings, a serving of cold lettuce, and a few black steamed buns. After they entered the house, Zhou Huiming looked at the dishes on the table and exclaimed, "Sister, I can see you're living well. It isn't easy to cook 3 dishes this year. I'm sure it isn't easy for you to come over. So, of course, I have to treat you well." After Zhou said this, she handed them a bowl and chopsticks and asked, "How long will you be staying over this time?" Chapter 291 The Flood. I'm here this time mainly for the white sweet potatoes in the manor. So, they'll leave only when the white sweet potatoes are ripe. After Zhou Huiming finished speaking, he picked up a black steamed bun and a piece of preserved meat. Zhou didn't say anything more. She also picked up her chopsticks and started eating. After the meal, Zhou made them a pot of Longjing tea. After 2 cups of tea, Zhou Huiming asked, I heard that the village planted nearly 100 acres of sweet potatoes, right? Right. Everyone planted some more later on. It should be around 150 acres in total. Zhou replied, That's great. More is better. Otherwise, I'm afraid the kingdom will be in big trouble. Zhou Huiming stated with a serious face. What's wrong? Did something happen? Several counties in the south have suffered from floods. The grain harvest for the second season was destroyed by the flood, so the white potatoes are critical to whether the Ming dynasty can be stabilized. When did this happen? Just 2 days ago. Do you still remember the passing rain a few days ago? It went down south and flooded the area. I see. Zhou Ying's heart was a little heavy after hearing this. If it was only a disaster in the north, there was still breathing room for the kingdom. After all, most people had already moved down south. Everyone's life would be a little hard and tiring, but they could still endure it. However, now that there was a flood in the south, the people were in despair. Don't tell anyone about this, in case it causes panic, Zhou Huiming reminded her. Understood. You should rest. Uncle Lu and I will go find Tan Jingzhou. Zhou Huiming nodded. As soon as Zhou heard this, she knew they had business to attend to. She got up and sent them out. She closed the door and returned to her inner space. She then took out many pumpkins and taros, sliced them with her mental power, and laid them to dry. If the situation worsened, they couldn't eat buns or rice. After that, she cooked red beans, soybeans, green beans, and black beans at low temperatures and ground them into powder for instant drinks. She also made some black sesame paste. At night, after Gu Chungrui returned, Zhou told him about the flood in the south. She sighed. The Ming dynasty is sure filled with disasters. It's normal. Things will inevitably get hard when there are no high-yield crops or food reserves. Now, I'm just afraid someone will take the opportunity to rebel. That'll be miserable for everyone. Gu Chungrui commented. By the way, when I just came back, I heard that the water level of the well at the village entrance has dropped, he said. With so many people using it, it's good enough that there's enough for everyone. Fortunately, the white potatoes are about to ripen. Once they've ripened, the water consumption will lessen. I hope we can hold on until it rains or snows. Otherwise, we'll have to go deep into the mountains to find more water. Gu Chungrui paused and continued. By the way, it's almost the 15th of August. You should find some time to make 10 pounds of mooncakes. Forget about the mooncakes. It's not suitable to make mooncakes that consume both oil and flour. They'll make some chestnut cakes and slaughter a sheep. We'll gift our acquaintances 2 pounds of mutton and 1 pound of chestnut cake. That's fine too. It's fine as long as it conveys the same meaning. We'll have to give our extended family 2 wolf pelts too. After dinner, the two of them entered the inner space. Gu Chungrui looked at the things she had prepared and smiled. He asked her to bring out some wheat bran, peanut cakes, a large number of dried white potato vines, and some dried dandelions. He then mixed them according to some predetermined ratio and crushed them into powder. Although these inferior noodles didn't look any different from the ones sold outside, they wouldn't hurt their throat and were healthy. As for Zhou, she started making chestnut cakes. However, she didn't only make the 10 pounds of chestnut cakes that Gu Chungrui suggested. Instead, she made more than 50 pounds of chestnut cakes, all of which were made using the mooncake mold. Chapter 292 A Treat 1. After she was done, she ate one. She then started to busy herself with other things, especially the various dried fruits in the mountains. The fruits were nearly half ripe, so she had to pick them up and store them in the warehouse quickly. The next day, Gu Chungrui didn't go straight to his clinic. Instead, he brought 2 pounds of chestnut cake, 2 pounds of dried wolf meat, and 2 pounds of dried beef. The couple then went to the manor together. Zhou Huiming, who was drinking a gruel made of white sweet potato vines with a disdainful look, saw them coming as his eyes lit up. He approached them and said, Brother Gu, you're here. Have you eaten? If you haven't, do you want to eat together? Tvi eaten. I'm just here to visit. Please hurry and eat your breakfast. Gu Chengrui replied. However, Zhou Huaiming didn't go back instead. He stared at the paper bag in his hand. Gu Chengrui smiled and handed it to him. This gift for you and Uncle Lu is for the 15th day of the 8th lunar month. It's a little shabby, so please don't mind it. How could that be? It's good enough to have meat to eat this year. Zhou Huaiming smiled as he took it and placed it on the table. After that, he found the beef jerky and took a bite. It's easy if you want meat. There are plenty of cattle and sheep in this village. If you want to eat them, you can pick one for slaughter anytime. Gu Chengrui replied. Really? They'll have to pick up some cows during the festival later. As for the price, they'll pay 20 taels of silver per cow. Oh right, there are also sheep. How about 5 taels of silver per head? There's no need. Don't refuse. We're brothers, but we should settle our accounts clearly. It's good enough that you're letting me eat your livestock. All right, but tonight I'll treat you. How about we eat some lamb skewers? Sure, I've been craving it for a long time, but I'm just too embarrassed to say it. Zhou Huaiming laughed. Oh right, I have wine here. You don't need to bring them, he added. All right, you can pick a sheep or 2 this afternoon. They'll come back early. Gu Chengrui turned around and left. Zhouing didn't want to run back and forth, so she stayed behind. After exchanging a few polite words with Zhou Huaiming and Manager Lu, she turned around and went to the livestock shed. Although cattle and sheep breeding was restrained as much as possible because of the lack of grass, many little ones were still being born. Lastly, she went to the grassland to look at the white sweet potatoes. She found Uncle Nian, who was harvesting the white sweet potato vines, and asked, Uncle Nian, do you think these white sweet potato vines can guarantee the cattle's and sheep's survival until next spring? It's hard to say. The problem is that we need wheat bran as the core ingredient. Otherwise, I'm afraid these aren't enough for them to eat. How much wheat bran and soybeans do we have in the warehouse? They should be able to last until the end of the year. You're sure good at being frugal. I had no choice. I saw something wasn't right, so I reduced the feed amount in early summer. All right, I'll try my best to get more white potato vines from the village. Also, try not to let them breed, or else we really can't afford to raise them. I understand. It's not the time for a last resort, so I wouldn't let them breed. Oh, where's the water source? Is there enough water here? The well at the foot of the mountain is enough, Uncle Nian said. I heard that the water level of the well in the village has started to drop. At this point, the old man looked up at the huge sun and continued with a pained expression. If this continues, I don't know if the cattle and sheep can be raised. If there's a chance, please sell some out. All right, they'll remember this. Zhouing nodded and told him about the lamb slaughter in the afternoon. However, she didn't say 2, but 5. The festival was coming soon, so she had to give some welfare to the other people living in the manor. After the sheep were slaughtered in the afternoon, Gu Chengrui returned with the restaurant's oven and iron skewers. After that, Zhouing directed everyone to start skewering the meat. She cleaned up the mutton giblets from the 2 lambs and made a big pot of mutton soup. She also added some vermicelli, tofu skin, and dried radish. Chapter 293 A Treat 2. The rich aroma of the mutton giblet soup drew in all the residents of the manor. Zhouing wasn't stingy. She gave each family a large bowl, including the people that Manager Lu and the others brought. She then gave Zhuang and the other long-term workers a bowl each. There wasn't much left, but it was enough for each of them to have a bowl. After the skewers started cooking, Zhouing asked someone to bring Chang Shun and Uncle Nian over. They sat together to roast the mutton. Of course, after it was cooked, she gave 5 skewers to each long-term worker. When they were almost done eating, Zhou Huaiming rubbed his stomach and said, "This is the most filling meal I've had in the past 6 months. I'm certainly not used to it." "No way. You don't have enough to eat in the military camp?" Gu Chengrui asked in surprise. In his opinion, although the food in the military camp during this bad year wasn't good, it wasn't to the extent of being unable to eat enough. Zhou Huaiming nodded. It's always half full, just enough to make sure I can lift my sword. Gu Chengrui nodded his head in understanding, and he didn't know what to say for a moment. Zhou quickly thought of the cattle and sheep the village could not afford to raise and asked, "Does the military camp accept cattle and sheep?" Zhou Weiming's eyes lit up. "Of course, they'll take as much as you have. But are you sure you want to sell it? It isn't worth the round trip if it's just a small amount." "I'm selling them. I'm afraid my restaurant won't be able to open for a while. The problem is that if they continue to reproduce, I won't be able to afford to raise them." "How much can you sell it for now?" Zhou didn't reply but looked at Uncle Nian. The older man was stunned for a moment. After he understood what Zhou wanted, he quickly chewed the meat in his mouth a few times and swallowed it, then said, "General Zhou, we can spare about 200 cows and 1,000 sheep. We should be able to produce 100 cows and 500 sheep from our farm, too," Manager Liu replied. "Good, great. The camp will have no problem holding on with the addition of these cows and sheep until the new year." Zhou Huaiming nodded. "But they're all living beings," he worriedly added. "I'm afraid it won't be easy to ship them. It's the same as human traffickers transporting people. Other than when they need to eat, we'll just drug them all the time." Gu Chengrui replied. Zhou Huaiming shook his head. "There are too many refugees now. The road isn't safe." After thinking for a moment, he said, "How about this? Give me 3 days. 3 days later, you'll hand over the cattle and sheep, and we'll pass you the money. We'll pay the price we agreed on before." "All right, then we'll talk about it in 3 days." Zhou nodded. After Zhou Huaiming finished speaking, he looked at Chang Shun, who was sitting to the side, and asked, "Chang Shun, right? How many people in the manor know how to plant white sweet potatoes from the beginning to the end?" Chang Shun paused for a moment before he hurriedly sat up straight to reply, "General Zhou, most of the elderly in the manor know, and there are about 10 of us." "That's great. Inform them that they should come with me on a long trip after the white sweet potatoes are harvested in a month." General Zhou stated. "You mean we are planting the sweet potatoes in the south?" Gu Chengrui asked. "That's right. Now, the entire Ming dynasty is short of food, so we must plant them as soon as possible. Otherwise, the people will starve and might do something terrible. It's best to find sandy soil with a water source nearby. Also, there are many kinds of insects in the south, so the land must be deeply plowed, and the people must be prepared to kill the insects. Otherwise, the white sweet potatoes will all be eaten by insects." Zhou reminded him. "So troublesome?" "It's not too much trouble. I think the old local farmers will definitely know. You can ask the local people when the time comes." "That's true. Every place has its own climate. We do have to pay attention to this." Zhou Huaiming nodded in agreement, then asked curiously, "Then why did you suggest choosing a place with sandy soil?" "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.